Газета «Нераскрытые преступления» в ответ на обращение общественной организации «Кавальер» в рамках борьбы с религиозным экстремизмом представляет.
Apologetica ed è arrivata una convocazione da parte del Papa.
Массимо Интровинье, итальянский социолог религии, доктор философии, профессор. Директор-основатель Центра изучения новых религий, бывший представитель председателя ОБСЕ по борьбе с расизмом, ксенофобией и дискриминацией.
Это журналист, вы что делаете? Что вы делаете? Это журналист. Подождите.
Кто такие, я сказал?
Это журналист, вы что делаете? Вы нарушаете закон. Статья 171.
Да?
Какой закон? Он находится при исполнении. Что вы делаете?
Good evening, dear Professor Introvigne.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for your time. I know that you are very busy as a scientist, as a specialist, as a lawyer, but we have some questions to you, and I hope you will help to understand how it could be in European country. Well, you are in New York now, and I guess you already know of what has happened today in Odessa. Namely, the attack of 3 journalists with the usage of tear gas and clubs. It's not a secret to anybody that you are not only a great scientist with a globally renowned name, but that you are also a lawyer. First of all, I will kindly ask you as a lawyer to comment the video materials that I have sent to you today and provide legal evaluation.
Well, currently I'm not an active member of the bar, but having said so, I have 30 years of experience as an attorney, and it seems very strange. I mean, the brutality of this force, I don't know if this force is part of the police or if it's a different force, but the brutality, particularly in attacking journalists, it's very unusual. And I understand from a report I saw in local media that they were not investigating a very serious crime. They were investigating a minor possible administrative infraction connecting with somebody putting parking devices that perhaps, or according to them, should not have been put there. So that seems a very mundane matter, simple, administrative. Nobody goes to jail for this, nobody is normally handcuffed for this. And so to convert an investigation on such a minor matter in a fight, particularly in beating journalists who were documenting what was happening, seems to be a very bad sign of the situation of law enforcement and public order in such a beautiful city as Odessa, where I have been. It's really a very pleasant city, so one would hope this sort of things will not happen there, but they do. And so one wonders whether it was not only about the parking tools, but it was rather a show of sort of a primitive power. This force wants to show that they are not accountable and they have no limits. Now, coming to my specialty, neo-religious movements, it's very disturbing that in the media report it came out that people were beaten and accused of being members of the Malzer cult. I don't know of any Malzer cult. I editor-in-chief of comparatively new, it has existed for 1 year, but very respected academic journal in the field of alternative spiritualities called the Journal of Chesnu, which really has a stellar board of editors, including almost everybody with somebody in the field of the study of new religious movements in the world, names such as Antoine Fevre at the Sorbonne, or Eileen Barker at the London School of Economics, or Gordon Melton at Baylor University in Texas. So it's really people who made history of studies of spirituality in the world. So we devoted one issue to the ideas of Mr. Maltsev and the Applied Science Institute. We didn't necessarily agree with all these ideas, which is normal, but we discussed them in a very scientific manner. And I believe the presence of the Applied Science Institute in Odessa is very good for Odessa. It should be recognized as a resource, not as a problem. So the fact that journalists are beaten because they are accused of part of a scientific or spiritual movement branded as a cult is another very bad sign. And I'm saddened and concerned by the story. It's actually very disturbing because I heard many times that in comparison to nearby Russia, the situation of tolerance for alternative scientific or spiritual or religious ideas much better in Ukraine. And I believe this is generally the case. So I hope this very disturbing incident remains an isolated one, because otherwise it will show that the climate is very unhealthy, even in the city of Odessa, and we are more or less close to what's going on in Russia, where members of spiritual or other minorities regarded as extremist by the government are often beaten and mistreated. But I was told even in international conferences by respected Ukrainian scholars, the situation in Ukraine is better. Ukraine should not be confused with Russia or China. And so the incident, when I became aware of it, looked very strange to me. So let's hope it's just a crazy day and we will turn the page and nothing similar will happen in the future. But it's also important, of course, the work of the lawyers to make those responsible accountable, because the persons responsible have committed crimes. And so they should realize that criminal activities are not tolerable and are not tolerated, and particularly the rights of the media and the journalists are very important. I served as a representative of OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, in 2011, and we did also an inspection of Ukraine to assess the situation of human rights. We met the Minister of Internal Affairs and other officers, and we had dialogue. We told them something needed to be improved, but it was fruitful and moderate dialogue. So I believe Ukraine also has some international obligations which concerns the right of the journalists, and international organizations, including the OSCE, who specialized in this field, do not take lightly the mistreatments of journalists. So I know Ukraine is very concerned about offering an international image as a country treasuring human rights and democracy. That's very good. It's nothing wrong, and a lot which is right in this attitude. But it is important that if Ukraine wants to project the international image of a human rights friendly country, they should understand that at the international organizations level, the right of the journalists are a primary concern, and the violence against journalists is not condoned, and is a very bad sign of the general human rights situation in a given country.
In today's interview, Nikolai Pokrovsky, the speaker of the deputy mayor of Odessa, Gennady Trukhanov, used the phrase "the cult of Maltsev." How could you comment on the situation when in official, the speaker of one of the main officials of the city uses the label which was made up by the representatives of the Russian Orthodox Church and the Russian Federal Security Service, FSB?
Again, that's very strange. Last year I was in Belgium at University of Leuven, and I participated in a session about Ukraine with well-known Ukrainian academics, including Lyudmila Filipovich, very well-known internationally. And I have no reason to doubt what Lyudmila and her colleagues were telling us, that when the Russian Federation and the Russian Orthodox Church moved against the Jehovah's Witnesses in 2017, which were liquidated as a cult, the general Ukrainian attitude was that this was wrong, and this idea of demonizing or disqualifying or dehumanizing entire groups of people as cults was regarded as wrong in Ukraine, and perhaps typical of what's going wrong in nearby Russia. So it looks strange that on the one side, Ukrainian authorities are criticizing Russia for their campaigns against cults, and rightly so. I agree with the Ukrainian authorities on this point. But on the other hand, certain local Ukrainian authorities are also using the word cult, and there is more about it, because the one very guy who, or one of the two main guys who started using the word cult with respect to Dr. Maltsev's activities is Alexander Dvorkin, and who is the leader of the St. Irenaeus of Lyon Center, the largest anti-cult organization in Russia. And Dvorkin was heavily criticized in Ukraine for his doctrine of Russia's spiritual security, which also led him to support the separatist activities in eastern Ukraine, and he ended up being banned from Ukraine. He cannot set foot in Ukraine. He's regarded as persona non grata there. So, but that's the very Mr. Dvorkin, together with another guy, created the mythology of Dr. Maltsev as leader of a cult, which is particularly preposterous because the Applied Science Institute, founded by Dr. Maltz, is not even a religion. It has certain ideas about mysticism and spirituality, but deals with a number of other purely scientific matters. So again, here there is a paradoxical contradiction that on one hand, the Ukrainian authorities seem to have correctly, in my view, identified Mr. Dworkin as a troublemaker. They don't want him to set foot in Ukraine. But on the other hand, they borrow from Mr. Dworkin the terminology about Ukrainian citizens, such as Dr. Maltz. And that's again very strange. So it seems there is some local situation prevailing in Odessa, which is running against what should be the Ukrainian normal. That's the only comment I can make, because I believe the attitude of not following the Russian policy about Jehovah's Witnesses or Scientology or other groups and keeping Mr. Dworkin at arm's length with not wanting to deal with him, it's very healthy. It's good Ukrainian policy. So it seems that in Odessa, of all cities, some local problems may run counter this received national Ukrainian wisdom.
One more question concerns the consequences for such statements for people like Nikolai Pokrovsky. What would be the reaction in the European Union countries for deception, defamation, and usage of labels that are used by religious extremists?
Well, unfortunately, not in all European countries we are in a position to teach others, particularly in France. There have been politicians who behaved very much like these gentlemen, but it's true that some of them lost cases for defamation for using the word cult, and had to pay very heavy fines, and some others were censored by the European Court of Human Rights. So, to be completely honest, in some countries, such as France, there have been a similar problem of using of a derogatory language. But it's true that experiences and also the case law of the European Court of Human Rights and the local courts has normally taught European politicians to be more careful in using the language. I believe cult is now being recognized by several court decisions to be an insult. We can discuss a lot about the different meaning of cults and the fact that 100 years ago the word was used by some sociologists in a neutral way. But today we should not focus on the scientific meaning of cult, which is very confused because there are so many definitions. We should ask a different question. When the average citizen reads the word cult, what resonates in his or her mind? And when people hear the word cult, they would immediately associate it with mass suicide, terrorism, homicide, theft, fraud. So cult is really becoming an insult, and there are courts of law which in Europe which have accepted that it's an insult. And so there is a very heavy burden of proof if you want to call Dr. Banzer's organization a cult, to prove that this organization is engaged in illegal activities, which I believe it has never been accused of, and if it has been accused of, it has not been proven. I believe we are reaching some extreme, because it seems, I always say that there are what I don't call them cults, I call them criminal religious movements. But criminal means they are guilty of very serious crimes, like rape or abuse children, terrorism, homicide. I always gave the example that a parking ticket doesn't make an organization, a religious or spiritual, scientific organization, a criminal one. But it seems that in Odessa it does. That parking is taken very seriously. So you are classified as a cult, and not if you rape women or abuse children or kill people, but if you commit what somebody believes to be infractions in the field of parking. So the slogan in Odessa seems to be no parking for the cults. So that's it will be humorous and a matter for a comedy if it was not the spy or more serious problems.
In your opinion, what would be the consequences for elected officials who gave an order to attack the journalists, if this was the case in Europe or the USA?
I believe they will go to jail, because it's regarded as a very serious crime. And as far as I know about United States, and I do know about most European countries, this kind of gross abuse of power, particularly when it involves journalists, is punished with jail penalties. So they will be tried, and most probably they will be sentenced to terms in jail.
Everybody knows that Ukraine is unfamous for high levels of corruption. Could you please tell what should be done by journalists in this case and in other cases as such, so that it won't be possible to hide or to attempt to close the investigation of such criminal offenses?
Well, Ukraine is part of the Council of Europe, and is part of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and of course it's also part of the United Nations. So at all these levels there are instances dealing with the protection of human rights, and in some cases even the protection of the rights of journalists. However, the principle governing this international fora is called the exhaustion of domestic remedies, meaning you cannot go straight to the international organizations without having tried before the domestic remedies. And only when the domestic remedies are denied, or if they are not denied, the matter goes for years and years, and it becomes clear that the tactic of the authorities is to delay until the case is forgotten. At this stage, you can reasonably claim that domestic remedies are exhausted, and you can proceed and go on and complain to the international authorities, including, of course, the European Court of Human Rights. So I believe that, again, Ukraine is very keen to to be a part of the respected part of the international community. In 2013, Ukraine had the presidency of the OSCE, so it's a respected part of international community. But with this respect also come obligations. So if the Ukrainian courts will not act for the justice, there are international courts where one can take the case.
Thank you, dear professor, for your time. And of course, we'll keep in touch with you, and we'll share with you by the results of investigation, because I think that this case is real interesting. It's an unusual case in international area.
It is. If it goes on, I may even write something about it. It will be interesting to investigate and publish something make a scientific investigation and publish about it. But let's see what develops and if there is a real investigation by Ukrainian authorities first.